growth outside of the US would overcome or be greater than membership within the US. How has that evolved, if I may ask?
Oh, well, I mean, our growth rate outside of North America has exceeded the growth rate in North America for several years. We have more than 50% of our members outside of the US. Now that includes Canada, and probably within a year or so, we'll have more than 50% outside of the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
Once, probably 2 years. Mexico is still growing, but Brazil is growing, South America is growing. So that, and we anticipate those will become high growth areas very quickly. So it just depends. Our fastest growing area of the world, sorry for those of you of Indian descent, is not India, no matter what they tell you. It is Africa. Africa is our fastest growing area in the world for the last 5 years now. So West Africa, tremendous growth. East Africa, tremendous growth. Southern Africa has already started 15 clubs this year. So
amazing.
Great.
All right.
I think we need to hand the meeting over to our Sergeant of Arms and just get us launched.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, from break. We are now moving to our second speech, and I will hand it over to you, Declan, to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. Earlier today, Patricia Fripp gave us great insights, wonderful tips, and very practical suggestions on how we can improve our communication ability with others. Thank you, Patricia. That was very informative. Communications is the first pillar of Toastmasters. Welcome to our second keynote speech today. And our second speaker will address the second pillar of Toastmasters, namely leadership. Distinguished Toastmaster Matt Kinsey is from Coral Springs, Florida, and he has been a Toastmaster since 2003. Of course, we all know that he is the current president of Toastmasters International for this current year, 2022-2023. Matt, all of us on this Zoom call are honored and delighted to have you as a keynote speaker here today. Thank you in advance for your time. Appreciate that. Now let's take a quick look at Matt's background outside of Toastmasters. Professionally, Matt is the Managing Director and Chief Information Security Officer of IT Fusion, an LLC based in Coral Springs, Florida. He oversees operations and security for this IT consulting firm, and his consulting firm focuses on small and medium-sized businesses in the South Florida area. Matt has also been recognized for his work with the Boy Scouts of America, serving in many leadership roles over a period of more than 25 years. When I think of that length of service and the roles that I've read about, Matt, you have made a generous contribution to the lives of so many young people while they are at the formative stages of their lives. Amazing. Now let's talk about today's keynote. Matt's presentation will last 30 minutes, and we'll give you a green signal at 25 and yellow at 28 and red at 30. Matt, that was your direction earlier. Appreciate that. And the keynote will be followed by a Q&A. And for the Q&A, all of our participants, I'm asking you to send your questions directly to me. And if it pleases me in the moment, I will represent your questions accurately to Matt. Following the experience of the prior keynote and Solazar's guidance, please keep your questions focused on what Matt is talking about. I think that's an appropriate and respectful thing to do. And a word, if I may, on Zoom hygiene. Please, please do not send chat messages to everyone. It's a very, very distracting practice. And please, please stay on mute. We are here to listen to Matt Kinsey and Matt only during his speech. So please be careful about your mute status. Now to his speech. That suggests that if you ask 100 different leaders to define leadership, you most likely will get 100 different definitions. Now, Matt, I might just take a moment and disagree with you, because I think if you ask 100 leaders a definition of leaders, you'll probably get 101 or more, because some of those guys will change their minds. Nonetheless, you asked the question, as somebody who has a leadership position, how do you know if you are acting as a leader? What does acting as a leader really mean? Today, Matt will share a definition of leadership built through practical stories and examples that he has developed over his more than 30 years of leadership. Please join me in welcoming our International President, distinguished Toastmaster Matt Kinsey, as he poses the question to all of us: are you a leader?
Are you a leader? I don't know. I don't know most of you. I've met a few of you, had brief conversations, but let's be honest, I'm not the one who can determine if you're a leader. So what I'm asking you to do today is to focus on the principles I'm sharing, because this is a question for you to determine if you are acting as a leader. Now, my first leadership lesson came very early in life. Do we have any athletes in the room? Or my favorite people that I used to be an athlete? Well, like most kids growing up, I wanted to be good at sports, and Abhijit, I was terrible. We got the World Series going on, and younger kids play a version of that called T-ball, where they put the ball on a stick so you can hit it. And I don't know if you've met anyone else, but I struck out playing T-ball. And after one baseball game, I walked up to my dad and said, "Dad, I want to run home." And my dad looked at me and goes, you want to run home? Now, we didn't live in San Francisco. Probably not a good idea to run home in San Francisco. But we lived in a very small community. In fact, the community was so small that when my parents moved in, they doubled the number of registered Democrats in the community. And everybody knew everybody. So I guess my dad figured, you know what? When he collapses on the side of the road, someone's going to pick him up. Now, we lived just about 3 miles or 5 kilometers from the baseball field. So my dad got in his car, he honked at me, he waved, I waved back, and I started running. And I got home and I walked in the door, and my dad put his paper down and he looked at his watch. "Who picked you up?" "Nobody, I ran home." "Matt, I think we found your sport." So I got into running and I loved it. If we have any endurance athletes out there, you know that feeling of being exhausted and fulfilled at the same time because you've accomplished something, that runner's high that you get from just being in this zone of peacefulness, even as your feet are going up and down, pounding through the road. And finally came the day of my first cross-country race. And I was up on the starting line. The starter raised her pistol in the air. She fired her shot. And I felt, oh my gosh, how many of you remember that television show back in the 1970s? Okay, I'm dating myself. The $6 Million Man? No. And that's when I realized that's how fast I was actually running, because all of the boys were passing me. And then all of the girls. Out of 173 runners that day, I finished 173rd. I was devastated, humiliated, defeated. And I walked up to my dad and said, "Dad, that's it. Sports are not for me. I quit." And my dad looked at me and he said the strangest thing. I mean, Declan, you probably heard growing up, winners never quit and quitters never win, or you made a commitment, you have to go back. no. He goes, well, Matt, you have to go back tomorrow. Your team needs you. What? Dad, I couldn't even see the short little girl who finished in front of me. Nobody cares that I was here today, and nobody will care when I don't show up tomorrow. I'm done. And my dad said, well, Matt, first off, that short little girl, she feels a whole lot better today because at least she beat you. Thanks, Dad. But when you go back tomorrow, and you will, no one else has an excuse to quit. Your team needs you. You know, as I've gotten older, I've thought about the lesson my dad was trying to share with me, because I think we do that as we get older. We really reflect on those moments with our parents. And I think what he was trying to tell me is something similar to what John Maxwell says, that leadership is influence. But with all due respect to John Maxwell, it's more than that. We can have the ability to change the thoughts and actions of those around us through our leadership, through our influence. But if we don't exercise that ability, we're not leading. So the first part of our definition of leadership is to exercise your influence. Now, as you can see, we've got room for some more parts. So we're going to fill in the rest of this. And some of you who've got really good spatial awareness can probably figure out how many points I'm going to have just from the spacing on there. We'll see if you're right. But we've got influence, and we can exercise that influence. But what the research has shown us is something that Toastmasters discovered 99 years ago almost. You need to be positive and supportive. Now, why? You know, in management school, if you ever took a management class, they talked about type A and type B leadership. You know, do people need to be beat into doing their job, or can you let them do the job? Well, here is what IBM found, is that when they switched from a negative feedback system to a positive feedback system, they got 3 times higher employee engagement. A Gallup study of companies that switched from negative feedback to positive feedback saw on average a 19% increase in sales, a 29% increase in profits, and a whopping 72% decrease in turnover, one of the costliest things for an organization. Now, in Toastmasters, we talk about the sandwich methodology all the time, right? You know, on an evaluation. Tell them something they did well, give them some things to work on, and tell them what they did well, right? Well, psychologists say that the best ratio is actually 6 to 1. And some new research is suggesting it may be as high as 7 to 1, that you need 6 to 7 pieces of positive feedback for every piece of critical feedback. Because critical feedback is important. You have to let people know when they're not performing the job that needs to be done. Now, for me, how many of you remember that book, The 1 Minute Manager? You know, catch someone doing something right. And it's a great principle, but you have to believe it. And I can remember so many times where I would talk to somebody and I would think, oh, they just read The 1 Minute Manager. Okay, you could tell because they would chew you out, and then they'd be like in their mind, you'd see this switch go off and they go, oh yeah, I gotta end with something positive. And then they would tell you something positive, and I got to be honest, I never believed it. Any of you ever had that experience? Well, I see some heads going, yeah, I've had that experience. So your feedback needs to be regular and consistent. So for example, if I'm working with your district director and she knows that I'm consistently giving her positive feedback, and then occasionally I'm saying, you know, here's something I really think you need to work on. Here's something where you're not performing the way we need to. She knows I care about her. She knows I care about her first and the mission second. So the best ratio is 6 to 1. And the only way to do that is regular and consistent, because you can't do that in a single conversation. So here's some tips on making sure it's positive feedback. It needs to be genuine, and it needs to show appreciation. And not just for results, but also for effort. It needs to be specific. You know, Jay checked with me, made sure he knew my timing, asked me how I wanted my timing lights to go. Thank you, Jay. That made my job, my comfort level coming here much higher, my job much easier. Now, if I just said, hey, Jay, thanks for helping me out, well, that's going to last a little bit. But now I've given him some specific things he did that helped me out, and he's going to get more out of that. And hopefully that'll last a little bit longer. Focused on effort and behavior, timely. It needs to be timely. If I waited 2 weeks to thank Jay, it's not as timely. This is right now. And I'm also thanking him publicly. And so you have to tailor it to the individual. And what I mean by that is some people don't like public praise. Now, that doesn't mean don't praise them in public, but don't overdo it. Make it brief and then follow up with the deeper for someone who doesn't. Some people like the limelight, and you can go on stage about them and how great they are for an hour, and they'll just soak it in. I'm not making a judgment about that. Just make sure that you tailor the positive feedback to the individual and the way they'll most likely receive it. So leadership needs to be exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner. But what are we leading people to do? History is replete with examples, not just history, but the current world environment demonstrates examples of people who are exercising their influence towards the accomplishment of something that destroys people, that divides people, that tears people apart. Where are we going? What is our mission that we are trying to accomplish? And that is so important for a team. Toastmasters mission. Does anyone know Toastmasters mission? Not the district mission, not the club mission. But Toastmasters mission is to empower individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. Notice it doesn't say anything about clubs and districts. That's how we do it. What we're doing is empowering individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. The district mission, for those of you who are district leaders, is to build new clubs and support all clubs in achieving excellence. And everything that we do as an organization is designed to support the club mission, to provide a supportive and positive learning experience in which members are empowered to develop communication and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth. Isn't that a worthwhile mission? If you're a club officer, I hope you think that's a worthwhile mission. If you're a district officer and the district mission doesn't excite you, hopefully the club mission does, because that's what you're doing, is you're supporting clubs in accomplishing their mission. So are we exercising our influence in a positive and supportive manner towards the accomplishment of a worthwhile goal? And you know what, if I stop there, I think most people would say, that's a good definition of leadership. But for those of you who are looking at the space left, you can see that there's at least a little bit more to go. And that thing is values. Toastmasters has core values. Yeah, most organizations have core values that they define. We've defined 4 core values: integrity, respect, service, and excellence. It's not RISE, it's URSE, okay? For those of you who speak Spanish, you know what that means, all right? But integrity comes first for a reason. Excellent, it's bookended with excellence. Now, is any one of these more important than the others? I don't think one's more important. I just think it's an order of which they come. Let's talk a little bit about what integrity is. And some of you may be familiar with this story because I did an article about it in the Toastmaster magazine. But June 23rd, 2021 at 6 p.m. in Surfside, Florida, USA, 98 people went to bed thinking it was a night like any other. They were going to get up the next morning. They were going to go to Starbucks. They were going to go to the gym, do a run along the beach, because Surfside is, as from the name you might think, is right on the beach. And then at around 1:30 in the morning, they were awoken with the sounds of metal screaming, concrete crumbling, and people screaming as they fell to their deaths. And this is the pictures that we saw in the front of the Miami Herald, and many people saw on the news around the world at 8 a.m. on June 24th, 2021. The next morning, the Herald said, disaster in Surfside, 1 confirmed dead, 99 missing. They only found 2 people alive out of that rubble. 98 people lost their lives that night. Now, everyone wanted to know what happened. What were the causes? And there were 3 main causes. One was a structural design flaw. The building was not designed well. It was built according to the specifications that the architect had put in and the engineers had put in, but there was a design flaw, and that design flaw in specific allowed water and salt water. They're right on the beach. Those of you who live close to the beach, you know how damaging salt water is to concrete and to metal. And this water and salt water was getting in and causing more damage to the existing design flaw. And the third issue was a failure of the leadership to act. The condo association knew about the problem. They knew the cost to fix it, and they never acted to do that. And because of that, the law in Florida has been changed that these types of things, the condo association no longer has discretion. They have to get these repaired, which I think is a good thing. But in your leadership, what's the salt water? Who is the person you're listening to, or the book you're reading, or the thoughts you have in your head that are damaging our existing design flaws, that are causing us to act out of our integrity? A lot of times it's a person who's giving you information that's in their best interest and not yours. Are you recognizing that? Because integrity is an inside job. It's when your thoughts and actions are aligned with your values and you make decisions based on those values rather than any type of personal gain. That respect. I always get a great kick in delivering this speech in Chicago because Aretha's from Chicago. But for those of you who are Aretha fans, R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. Now, many of us have heard of, the golden rule, which is expressed in multiple cultures around the world, said a little differently, but it's basically, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Dr. Tony Alessandra came up with the platinum rule. It says, treat other people the way they want to be treated, which means I have to get to know them. I need to understand, how does Abhijit want to be, addressed? How do I say his name properly? Is he more introverted? Is he more extroverted? Can I get him out on stage in front of everybody, or am I going to just gently nudge him? Or can I just say, hey, go, and he'll go? I need to find out what that means to him, to each person that I work with on the team, so that I can treat them the way they want to be treated. Now, service is pretty easy. It's giving our time and talents for the benefits of others. But service is also a little tricky. So earlier in my career, I worked in a strip center. I worked for a company called Kinko's. And at one end of the strip center was a restaurant whose name I shall not say. And I went there for dinner, once a week or so. There were 3 restaurants in the strip center, so there's only so many places to go. And they knew me. Okay, I walk in, they put a Coke down. They knew what my order was. I'm one of those restaurant guys who has a standard order at every restaurant I go to. I'm sorry, that's who I am. I want to go to that restaurant. This is the dish I want to get. Okay, I'm not really the exploratory, because I'm more of a food is fuel type of person rather than a foodie. Well, this night I did not get my normal level of service. Now that is, well, let's just say you don't expect the same level of service at a McDonald's that you do at a Chili's restaurant that you would at a Morton Steakhouse. Okay. You've got a different service expectation. And so, you know, casual dining, you got a certain expectation, and they didn't meet it that night. And I finally asked for the waiter to come over, and I just said, look, I just want to let you know, I'm not real happy tonight. And he's like, oh, hold on. Let me get you a free meal. And I'm like, no, please, you know, let me tell you what, no, let me get you a free meal. We'll take it. And I was like, okay, can I talk to your manager? Because I was a little frustrated because he wasn't even listening to me. So then the manager comes over. The exact same thing happens. I'm like, I just want to let you know. Oh, I'm really sorry about that, sir. He cut me off, did not even let me finish. And I got mad. I got to be mad. Not one of my better moments, but I was like, look, can you just shut your mouth and listen to what I'm saying? And let me tell you what happened. And he goes, okay. So finally I get out what happened, and he goes, okay. All right. Oh, I'm really sorry. Can I please give you a free meal now? Now, I had never asked for a free meal. He never even asked what I wanted. So I was in one of those moods. I'm like, I'm getting home tomorrow. I work in the evening. So the next morning I got home. When I got home, I called the regional office. I'm like, I need to talk to the regional manager. I am through with it. And she called me back after a little bit while. She goes, yeah, I understand you had a problem in one of our stores. I start to tell her what happened. Within 15 seconds, she goes, I'm really sorry, sir. Can I give you a free meal? And I just lost it. I go, look, ma'am, I said, I got to tell you, I was upset with your manager. I was upset with the waiter. I'm not anymore. And she's like, oh, well, that's great. Why aren't you upset with them more? I said, because now I know where they get it from. Service is in the eye of the beholder. How can you best serve the members of your team? There's a statement, you need to treat all members of your team equally. And I do not believe that is true. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about playing favorites. What I'm saying is everyone on your team has individual needs, and you have to meet them where they are. Some people need to be left alone. Some people need more hand-on-hand guidance. If you treat everybody equally, you're not treating anybody well, especially the team, in my opinion. Now, excellence. Is excellence a standard? Is it a journey? I think, well, like what Aristotle said over 2,000 years ago, is excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent execution, represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. Now, if you've ever been to Tony Robbins, if you've ever been to, Zig Ziglar or any of these motivational speakers, this is a message from 2,000 years ago that still represents very well today. Excellence is a choice. And to me, it's that journey of just trying to be a little bit better every day. But values are incredibly important. And having a set of agreed upon values is critical. Now, if you read the magazine profile of me in the September magazine, you know I'm an amateur cyclist. I've been cycling for over 40 years now, over 250,000 miles lifetime. And this man was my hero. For those of you who don't recognize him, his name is Lance Armstrong. You may recognize the name. Lance Armstrong was an incredible story. He won the world championship at a young age. Then he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Devastating form of cancer for men. He came back after a successful treatment, and he became the second American to win the Tour de France, the most difficult, famous bike race in the world. And then the next year he won it again. And he won it again, and he won it again. 7 straight years he won the Tour. More than anyone in history. The most anyone had won before was 5, and not in a row. Now, there were rumors. There were stories that he was cheating. He was using performance-enhancing drugs. And every single time somebody approached him about it, his refrain was very consistent. I've been tested more times than any athlete in history, and I've never failed a test. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him because I took inspiration from his story. And when I was out on a bike ride and I wanted to quit, I'm like, would Lance Armstrong quit? No, he wouldn't quit. I need to meet my goal, and I'd go continue on. And I would say, if he overcame what he did of overcoming near death to come back to perform at this level, what is my excuse? Now, first, his statement was a lie. He had tested positive, it had been covered up. The second thing is when people went after him, he destroyed their lives. But finally, who else do you tell your story to but Oprah Winfrey? He comes out on a cable television show to admit to the world that he'd used enhancing drugs, not just at a small level, but at a level that has never been seen before. Amazing story. And that almost destroyed me. Because I thought, if the inspiration he gave me is a lie, what I accomplished is a lie. Now I know now that's not true, but at the time I struggled with it. Winning isn't everything. Values are. So we're almost done. Leadership is exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner towards the accomplishment of a worthwhile goal while following an agreed upon set of values. And if I stopped there, I would actually be comfortable. But you see, there's space for one more line. So many years ago, I was at a conference hosted by the late, great Bob Proctor, the Toronto Tornado, one of the greatest motivational speakers ever, most successful. And at lunch, the MC came up and said, ladies and gentlemen, over lunch today, you're to go out on the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona, and invite a stranger to lunch. Come back and tell us about your experience. So here we have 800 people infiltrating the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona, trying to get a stranger to go to lunch with them. And for me, it was not going well. I walk up to someone and say, hey, you want to have lunch with me? And they go, oh, no, you leave me alone, back off. I don't know if they thought I was trying to ask them on a date, convert them to my religion, or get them to sell Amway, but it was not going well. And I got frustrated. I sat down and I was like, what am I going to do? I am going to fail at this assignment, and that is not acceptable. And I thought about something my mom used to tell me. What she said was, Matt, in whatever you do, find your purpose. Now that's completely opposite of what most motivational speakers say. They say, find your purpose and then go out and do. And she says, no, you're doing something. Why are you doing it? What's the purpose? And I said, you know what? I want to thank a veteran for his or her service. And I started picturing a veteran. And I know many women have served extremely well, but in my mind, I started picturing an older gentleman with white hair, kind of bald, maybe a little looking like Declan there, and a cane, a ball cap, and the word Arizona flipped across my mind, but I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? I stood up. I walked around the corner. And he was right in front of me. The exact individual I had pictured. White hair, very wizened face, a cane, and a ball cap that said USS Arizona. And I walked up to him and I said, sir, would you please do the honor of going to lunch with me? And he's like, why? Well, this is a good start, okay? He's not running away. I said, well, I noticed your cap. I decided I wanted to thank a veteran for his service. Would you please go in and have lunch with me? And he said, well, my mama told me never turn down a free lunch. So we went inside, ordered our food, started talking. And the gentleman's name was Bill. And after a few minutes, I said, Bill, tell me about your ball cap. I mean, did you know somebody on the Arizona? And he's like, or did you just visit the memorial? He goes, know someone? Hell, boy, I was on the Arizona. Because it was right around assembly time, And I heard the sirens go off, and my first thought was, here comes another drill. I said, but then I saw everyone pointing out in the horizon. I looked out. There was a fleet of planes, and it was very clear very quickly that it wasn't our boys. Within the next few minutes that felt like days and seconds at the same time, there were bombs, torpedoes. The smoke deck behind me blew up, and I was thrown into the water at Pearl Harbor. And I watched my ship go down. I'll never forget that day. I almost missed that moment because I didn't understand the assignment. The assignment was not to have a story to tell. The assignment was to connect with another human being. And that connection has stood with me. Now, Bill, unfortunately, has passed since, but I will always honor his service, and I will always remember that moment that he's impacted me, that is still lasting more than a decade later. Start with your heart. Your assignment as a leader is to start with your heart. Goals are important. Goals are how we measure whether we're meeting our mission. But in my experience, the only way you ever achieve your goals is through a team of people, and put your emphasis on them first. So we have our definition: exercising your influence in a positive and supportive manner towards the accomplishment of a worthwhile goal, following an agreed upon set of values, and starting with your heart. If you choose to operate this way, you may not always be right, but you will never be wrong. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And perhaps, Matt, we can stop the sharing so we can, oh, there we are, we're side by side. Well, first of all, thank you for this perspective. I appreciate the hugely personal element that you brought to it with your stories, particularly of that building disaster in Florida. I mean, it's just heart-wrenching. And we all watched leadership duck and weave and not accept responsibility. Now, over the next 15 minutes, Matt, I have this wonderful task of absorbing these questions from the audience, deciding which of them have merit or which of them either please or displease me, and I'm on your side. So we'll get to the questions now.
All right.
Now, of course, I really like the way you presented the sequence of attributes or principles when you finished with the notion of the heart. But I think for leadership, Matt, sometimes the head wants to be the dominant entity. Yeah. And what for many leaders, and it is what gets them to the leadership positions, is their ego. And I think implicit in what you're saying is that leaders need to regulate that ego. They can't change that ego. We all have a sense of self. So how would you suggest that we as leaders regulate our ego so that we do lead from the heart?
You know, I think an important aspect of leadership is knowing when. When do you let your head lead? When do you let your heart lead? And honestly, when do you let your hands lead with actually doing the work? All of them are important in leadership, and you have to discern when to start. So I say start with your heart, but you got to support it with your head, okay? Because pure heart-led leadership rarely accomplishes anything, okay? It rarely accomplishes anything. Sometimes it does, but you can have a team that everybody loves each other and doesn't get anything done. That's not effective.
Yeah.
So I think what you have to do is step back, and it's offsetting goals. Okay. So I work in IT. Everyone's familiar with calling some IT call center help desk. All right. And if you tell the reps on the help desk, okay, you need to reduce the amount of time you're on the call, they will do that. They will do that, okay? Because they're being incentivized for it. So you have to offset that with first call resolution without reopening, or with customer service scores to make sure your customer service scores don't go down. So that's what you have to do. You've got to regulate that head with your heart. And I think the way to do that is get out of yourself, okay? If you get out of yourself as a leader and focus in on the mission, why was I in this position? And it's really easy. We have board discussions and something will come up, and I'll have my view on it. And then somebody will bring something up and go, wait, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't considered that. Always a question is what's best for our members? What's best for the membership as a whole? Okay, so I think that's what you have to do. Tie that to the mission to offset that.
Great, yeah, that's a great point. And I like the fact that you say that, and it feeds off the respect value that you talked about. Those people answering those calls, Matt, have a different experience maybe than you have in your role as the leader of the company. They may, and you're being respectful to them by asking them maybe their opinions. And that, I think, engages people emotionally and connects them more with the mission of the company. So that's a great point.
Absolutely.
Now, some of the questions that come in on chat, people are struggling a little bit with that 6-to-1 ratio. Matt, if we spend all that, positive, I'm an engineer, positive feedbacks put systems out of control. We know that from our mathematics. More seriously, how can we actually make sure that the improvement suggestions are not washed away with that 6-to-1 ratio, 7-to-1 ratio? Because people need to know the gaps, right?
Right. And that's why it's being crystal clear. Okay. So the more specific and the more devoid of emotion you can be when you discuss these opportunities, for improvement. Now, there's power in the way you phrase things. Right. And so one of those ways, I think, is avoiding judgmental language. Well, Declan, you should have done that. Well, you're immediately on the defensive. And instead if I ask, well, Declan, what else could you have done? Now we're having a conversation.
Right. Yeah.
That's still positive and supportive, but it's getting to the point of, okay, he's telling me I'm not meeting the standards I need to get there. And the other thing is metrics, and everybody hates metrics except engineers and accountants. Okay, but metrics are critically important. And when hey, you're supposed to close so many tickets a day and you're not there, it doesn't become you're not doing your job. It's you're not meeting the standards for the job. And it's a completely different discussion if you have consistent, fair metrics that you're measuring everybody against.
This next question is one that's so close to my heart. I wish I had thought of it to ask you, but it comes from somebody on the floor. How do leaders in Toastmasters encourage people to take those incredible skills around communication and leadership that we've learned in a very safe environment to take it out into the world where there's a little bit more risk?
Yeah.
Matt, how would you help with that?
So I have yet to find a person who joined Toastmasters to become a better speaker in a Toastmasters club. They're looking to become a better speaker outside of Toastmasters. So remind them of what their goals were, provide opportunities for them. But the more important way is the way you react to the stories that you share. There are so many people who think that their story doesn't matter. Well, no one cares about my story. It's not this, rags to riches story. It's not this crime to life of fame story. It's, I had a couple problems. I fixed them and I moved on. And I'm like, yeah, like the vast majority of people who need to hear stories like, hey, I'm just like you. All right. And that's why it drives me nuts as a consultant, when I come in and I'll tell the company something, and the IT guy in the company goes, I've been telling that for 2 years. Okay. And so I always acknowledge that. Some of you, I could tell, I saw someone's head, he's been on the receiving end of that. I know it. Okay. Where he's been telling the company something for 2 years. The consultant walks in and goes, oh, you should do this. And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. We've never heard that before. But the reality is they didn't hear it because the experience is different. So you've got to find different ways to say things and encourage people to share their story, because their story makes a difference in the world.
And we take that learning and that confidence maybe, and we then can begin to apply it maybe in the outside world, because we've mapped out.
Yeah. Darren LaCroix says the two best audiences in the world are the World Championship of Public Speaking and the Tonight Show. Okay. But he's probably not wrong. But how many of you have ever gone to a speaker, an event by a speaker, or someone who came in to talk at work and gone, well, man, I hope this guy's terrible? No, everyone in the audience wants you to be good. They want you to do well. They are on your side 100%. They want you to be compelling. So hold that vision. If you can't do it for yourself, hold the vision that they're holding for you as the example of how to be.
Going back to part of your message here, it's clear that you're really saying that you connect with people and you connect through the heart, through the emotional level, and you care about them. Mm-hmm. Eleanor Roosevelt said that a good leader inspires people to have confidence in the leader, but a great leader inspires people to have confidence in themselves.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you personally, Matt, if I may ask?
Yeah. So I think that you have to have both. But a really good leader, there's signs like you're not really a leader until you've developed a leader behind you. Some people have said
right.
that. I think there's some truth to that. What's more important for me to give your district director instructions on every day of how to do the job, because I know what needs to get done, and here's what you need to do today, and tomorrow she calls me up and goes, here's what you need to do tomorrow? Or should I empower her to say, okay, here are the objectives, here's 40 different ways you can do it, you've picked what way works best for you, all right, as long as you meet our objectives at the end, that's the way I run my business. I don't care what method they use unless it's a specific government required process that, the government said we got to do this, or some industry standard, then we have to do that. But everything else, you work the way that is most effective for you, because I have confidence in you. When I was at Kinko's, I had a guy come to me one time and he's like, I was a general manager. He goes, I don't know how to run this job. And I asked him, like, well, how do you think you should run the job? And he told me, and he was completely wrong. And I said, go ahead, run the job that way. And he comes back to me like 15 minutes later, like, that didn't work. Why'd you let me do that? I said, number one, will you ever try to run the job that way again? He says, no, I know. I'll never do that. That's a dumb way to run that job. And I said, number two, what'd that cost me? Like $3 or $4 in supplies? I said, I would gladly invest $4 in you to know that I have confidence in you, and it's okay to make a mistake as long as you clean it up. And it took him a while to get it, but he finally got it. And it was amazing watching his transformation over time. So he went from having confidence in me to over time having confidence in himself. And then as a leader, he was a lot easier to manage. He was a lot easier to promote, to give more responsibility to, because he had that confidence in himself. And that's who I want on my team. I tell you, as the chair of the board for Toastmasters, I have a ton of highly confident, highly competent people on my team, and I would not have it any other way.
You know, and again, your reply highlights to me and reminds me of my own situation. When a leader expresses confidence in an individual contributor, let's say, or somebody lower in the organization, and that person knows they're invested with responsibility and trust, it can have a major transformation on the way you look at anything.
Yeah. If you're an NFL football fan, you're seeing two prime examples of that right now with Daniel Jones and the New York Giants and Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. Their new coaches have confidence in them. They know they have confidence. They're not being afraid they're going to be yanked out of the game, and they're playing carefree, and they're playing at a much higher level than they have played their entire time. It's a perfect example, even if you're not a sports fan. Just the difference in their performance because of the confidence that the coach has in them that's instilled their self-confidence.
If I ever ask you this question again at another session, I want you to talk about soccer because that's my sport. But anyway, let's leave it at
All right.
One of the questions I've got on the chat is that leadership, there isn't, well, here's the hypothesis. There is no universal leadership model. It's individual. You know, I am so handsome. My beauty affects my management style or leadership style. More seriously, you know, your style is different from, say, Margaret Page, from Pat Johnson, some prior leaders. So what do you say to that notion? And I like that you refer back to Aristotle, because that speaks to the permanency and the notion. There are principles back a long time, but just help our guest or our member here understand that notion of, is it more personal? You know, is leadership more personal, or is it more universal? Those principles.
All right, I'm not a software developer. But what I do know, talking to software developers, I know there are some on this call, that you can often tell who wrote the code on your team by the way they put the code together. Okay, but the principles are the same. The principles are exactly the same, but they just chose a different way to get there. And so the principles are universal. The way those principles are done and the way you express those principles are what makes the magic of one leader versus another, and why some leaders resonate with me and more, and some resonate with Morag more, and some resonate with Roddy more, because we're all individuals, but we're trying to apply the same principles of leadership. Project management's the same way. If you're a project manager, there's project management principles, and then there's development. Robert's rules, if you like Robert's rules, there's a set of Robert's rules, but every person brings their unique understanding, their unique experience to it. And that's where the flavor in life comes from. So, and I like flavor in my food.
Even though I see the red signal, one of the wisdoms that I heard earlier from Patricia Fripp was, when we have a presenter such as you, and again, I thank you for your time, I want to give it back to you for 1 minute and give us that closing message that, you know, is from your heart on this topic to this team. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit different than on this topic. I'm going to go into what we do as Toastmasters Matters. Oh. And I want you to understand that. When we talk here about having a worthwhile mission, I personally can't think of a more worthwhile thing to do than to instill self-confidence in other people. And that's what we really do. You know, think about the club mission, which results in greater confidence and personal growth. That's the result we're looking for. Communication leadership skills are the tools we're using. I'm a Boy Scout volunteer. We're looking for a result. We use camping and outdoor skills to achieve that result. All right. I'm a member of Business Network International. We have a result we're looking for, but we use network referrals to meet that result. So let's focus on the result. And the result of what we're doing is, as we look around the world, Dr. Smedley said in one of his later writings that communication opens the door to understanding, and understanding opens the pathways to peace. And as we look at the conflict in the world, whether it's the situation in Russia and Ukraine, what's going on in Myanmar, the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, the devastation from natural disasters we've seen this year. People need peace. Peace comes from understanding, and understanding comes from communication. So what we do as a Toastmaster matters. It matters in your personal life. It matters in your family. It matters in your community. It matters in the country. And it matters to the world.
Everybody on the call, I know, joins me in thanking you for your time and your insights today. It's been a privilege. Thank you again, Matt. Back to our contest organizers.